I appreciate that your time is probably under even more pressure than my own, so it's very good that you can be here to welcome me in person. Thank you very much indeed. So yeah, Andrew contacted me a couple of months ago, asked if I would be willing to contribute to the seminar series, and of course delighted to be able to do that. We're a university who wants collaboration. We need collaboration because of our tendency or our potential to be isolated here in the Faroe Islands. You know, obviously an institution that we'd be very keen to collaborate more with is in fact the University of the Highlands and Islands. So the name of our university, Froskaparsetar Firja, and that means the Faroese seat of knowledge. Yeah, it's a beautiful name which comes from a beautiful language. And Andrew has asked me to speak a little bit about the university, about its history, its development, its role in Faroese society, some of the research that we do, and maybe to make a few comments also about you know, the work that we do and how it might relate to the UHI Islands Strategy. I should just say that I'm actually, just before I came into this meeting, I was writing a letter of support for a project which is being sent off for a funding application, which is led by Mike Danson, who I'm sure you all know, which is about collaborative work, bottom-up work with island communities in Scotland, focused on dealing with some of the urgent challenges that they're currently facing and the role that local communities themselves play in relation to that. So hopefully that's the first or another one of a number of collaborations that we have, but one which we'll be building on in the future. So if I can just get the, I'm having difficulty getting the slides to move on, but yeah, I've already been introduced. I'm having to do this a slightly strange way. So you can see my background here. I'm a social scientist by training, studied in what was Paisley College of Technology in the 1980s, and then in Stirling University, Housing Policy and Practice. So I'm very much an interdisciplinary social scientist by training. I spent most of my career at the University of the West of Scotland, where I took a PhD in political sociology. Was never in a dramatic rush to be promoted or have an academic career, but latterly maybe took some of those steps in terms of becoming a professor in 2015 and then taking on more developed managerial responsibility in Scotland over the past few years. And ultimately that led me in a kind of strange and entirely coincidental way to applying to become rector here in the Faroe Islands. I've been here since 2019. My initial contract is until 2024. So that's just a little bit about me and my background. So my brief for today is to talk about the history and development of my university, to talk about some of the research which is undertaken here, and I'll do that briefly, and then to say something about the potential relevance of some of the work that we are doing for the themes of your own island strategy, which has those 5 themes, which I'm sure that many of you will know better than I do. I won't read them out here because I'll come back to them at the end. So situating things, because I'm not presuming that everyone will know where the Faroe Islands are. I know that one of my vice principals at the University of the West of Scotland, when he heard I was going to the Faroes, believed I had a job in Portugal. So, not everyone knows where the Faroe Islands are, although in recent years I think people in Scotland know more about the Faroe Islands, partly because we tend to get drawn against the Faroe Islands in international football competition, including recently, and I'll say something about that soon. So there you can see us on the map, roughly halfway between Norway and Iceland in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, and actually our nearest neighbour is in fact Scotland and is in fact the Shetland Islands. And historically there have been strong connections between the Faroes and the Shetland Islands, including I think until about 10 years ago a ferry which used to go from the Faroes to Norway and Denmark, which stopped off in Shetland. So there are strong historical connections, though maybe those have been lost a bit in recent times. Here you can see the archipelago of islands a little bit more up close, so 18 islands. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving here. Can you see my cursor on the screen? You can. So the main population centre here is Tórshavn. That means Thor's Harbour. And if you ever get to come here, you'll understand why it's called Thor's Harbour. But an archipelago of 18 islands, which are increasingly interconnected with very impressive tunnels. Yeah, the Faroese have been very, very good at developing connectivity in recent times by building undersea tunnels, including some which go 6–10 kilometres. And in due course, there is going to be a tunnel which will be going from Tórshavn, or the vicinity of Tórshavn, via Sandoy, this island here, all the way to Suðuroy. So that's a total, I think, of about 11 kilometres, and will save people from the current 2-hour boat trip to get from Suðuroy to Tórshavn, which often can't actually take place because of weather conditions. So some interesting developments there. So we are a self-governing nation within the Kingdom of Denmark. We have our own Faroese Parliament and government, a high degree of home rule, including in the areas of education and specifically higher education. That gives us some great advantages, but also some challenges, because we're not part of a developed higher education system of a larger nation. We're not part of the European Union, although we're part of the Kingdom of Denmark. We are not part of the European Union, and there is no sign that we will become that, and that to a large extent is because of fisheries policy and the importance of fisheries to the Faroe Islands. We have 2 members of the Danish Parliament elected from the Faroe Islands, and Faroese is the official language of the Faroe Islands and the language of education. So that gives us some real distinctiveness. 95% of our teaching and learning happens in the Faroese language. And we're committed to maintaining that in terms of our commitment to the Faroese language, though not necessarily to retaining the commitment to that proportion of our education being delivered in Faroese. An example for comparison would be the University of Iceland, which has, I think, a third of its courses delivered in English. And as we internationalise, that's something that we want to move towards as well. That's a commitment on the part of both government and the board of this university. So a little bit about the origins and development of our university. The origins of the university lie in the Faroese Academy of Sciences, which was established in 1952 and began to deliver education of various kinds. And then in 1965, we had Professor Owe established with the English/Latin name of Academia Faroensis, founded in 1965 as an institute of higher education, teaching and research, but primarily focused on language. And it was established in a newly built building with very few members of staff and primarily focused on the preservation and development of the Faroese language, but also focused to some degree on literature and natural history. And that's how it was for the first 7 years. So the Faroese University is not like, say, the Danish universities, which were created in the 1960s and which had the resources of the Danish state to make them grow and become well-established, large international universities very quickly. The evolution in the Faroe Islands has been very much an incremental evolution. So there we have our Faculty of Faroese Language and Literature. That is just behind me up the hill here. It's the one building which has in fact been built for the university. The rest of our buildings we rent or we have the use of via government. In 1972, Natural Sciences was spun off as a separate department, and in 1987 we established a Faculty of History and Social Sciences. And it was at that point the institution of higher education and research became a university and was given university status in Faroese law. So at that point, Professor Owe became the University of the Faroe Islands in its English title. Now, jumping forward a bit, the new university. So you've seen the old university there, if you like, and here is maybe one emblem of the new university. This is a building called the Sjóvarnahuset, which means the sea industry house. And you can see this strange looking silo at the end of the building. Now, this is exactly what it was. It was a silo. So this is a building where fish processing historically took place, and this was where the salt was stored in this silo for salting the cod, which became the bacalhau, which was exported to the Mediterranean, the salt fish. And the person who owned this building was known as the Salt King. Yeah? because the ownership of the salt gave him the kind of status of a kind of monarchical status here in Faroe Islands. So these days we have in this building the Kongshull, the King's Hall. So on the top two levels of that building we have this auditorium, which is our kind of principal auditorium here at our university. And you can see there the silo, and you can see the context of the building, which is it's very much part of a working harbour, which comprises shipping, of course, ocean fishing, and just round the corner here there is also a shipyard. So it's very much part of a working harbour kind of an environment. Now, just to bring you up to speed a little bit with the development of the university, in 2008 the university was part of a merger which saw the integration of the colleges of nursing and teacher training into the university. Now, I think there are a few mergers, institutional mergers, which could be described as straightforward, and this was certainly not a straightforward merger. In the Faroe Islands, although we're a small nation, there is something about the dynamic which produces a centrifugal force where you might imagine that there would be likely to be a centripetal force. Have I got that the right way around? Yes, I have got that the right way around. Now, in the years immediately following that, which were the years of the banking crisis and collapse, heavily impacting on Iceland and on the UK, our nearest neighbours, we had a big challenge of population retention here in the Faroe Islands. This was the period which has been described as exit Faroe Islands. And it gave us an emerging demographic and skills crisis. And in that context, the imperative was to retain population. And one of the ways in which government tried to achieve that was by investing heavily in the university, setting a target for the Faroese population of 50,000. At that point, it had fallen to something like 47,500, and that was becoming critical. And the university at that point developed a strategic plan with the aim of having 1,500 students by 2024. So we had very much a kind of quantitative focus for our university, and to some extent that meant that we were less focused on the development of structures and systems and strong administration. And more recently we have been playing catch up on that. So in this building we have our faculties of natural sciences and technology and our faculty of health sciences. The current situation then, we have 5 faculties: Faroese language and literature, history and social sciences, natural science and technology, education and health sciences. We have about 155 full-time equivalent staff, 100 of whom are full-time equivalent academic. We have around 1,000 students spread across our 5 faculties. And we have government funding of approximately 120 million Danish kroner. We supplement that with income that we have also from other sources, but this is by and large and very much our main source of funding, although something we're trying to diversify. And the Faroese population, the good news is it's now 54,000. So we very much have a booming and growing population. We also have a thriving economy, almost no unemployment at the moment, and almost all of our graduates, almost all, 97% of our 2020 graduates were in a graduate destination within 12 months of graduating the institution. So that tells us something about the kind of current development in the Faroe Islands. And this building is our Faculty of History and Social Sciences. Now, currently we're working closely with government to move forward with a plan to have a new campus built for the university. It's taken some time to achieve, but we've got some specific money to progress with that process in the near future. Had it been a tunnel we were building, it would probably have been built already. Some people have suggested that if we were to build a new university campus in a tunnel, we'd get it very quickly. So we're trying to make the new university campus as appealing to the politicians and policymakers as tunnels have been in the preceding years. These are our education programmes. Sorry, I'm just having a little difficulty moving between slides here. So you can see our programmes. divided across the faculties in the left-hand column, the programmes, and then the levels in the subsequent columns. And where you see red, those are programmes which are phasing out. Where you see yellow, those are new programmes which have come in the past couple of years, or which we expect to develop in significant ways in the coming years. So you can see that we're training nurses, we're training teachers, we're training pedagogues. Pedagogues in this sense, in our context, means people who are involved in early years education and people who are involved in working with adults with special needs. We have a thriving software engineering programme. We have the key social science disciplines, certainly not them all, and of course Faroese language. So I'm happy to make this presentation available for people after the presentation today, if any of this information would be useful to them. So, our role in Faroese life, I selected this picture. It's outside of the Kongshuckle, the silo, but you can see that there is a rather well-worn forklift truck in the foreground, and I think that encapsulates the fact that although we are a small institution, in our society we do a lot of heavy lifting, and we do that in a very pragmatic, practical, down-to-earth kind of way. So the mission of our university is summarised in our current strategic plan along the lines that you see there. They're the obvious things that you would expect any aspiring modern professional university to be doing. Distinctive high quality higher and continuing education to serve the needs of the islands. Similarly with high quality research, especially that which is directly relevant to the needs of the Faroe Islands and also to other countries and territories of a similar size. And then the performing of that wider public service in response to the needs of the Faroe Islands, including in relation to language. And we try to see language in the broader context of the pursuit of sustainability. Yeah. So yeah, those are the things that we're doing, things that you would expect us to be doing. Just a little word here on a reference in the second bullet point to other countries and territories of similar size. So we have recently become active participants in an interesting network called the Network of Universities of Small Countries and Territories. That involves countries or small territories like San Marino, Liechtenstein, Andorra, Gibraltar, Malta, and many others. And we're taking an active role in that network and trying to develop that as a system for mutual support and learning, but also we hope in due course as a representative and lobbying vehicle for small universities in the European higher education area. That said, our own country, the Faroe Islands, is not currently part of the European higher education area, and we are going through an institutional review here at the moment over the course of this year. And in that context, we will be joined, one of the members of the team will be a representative from San Marino, who has recently played the key part in having San Marino enter the European higher education area. Moving on, our strategic plan has a rather prosaic vision. The vision of a modern professional university working in partnership to deliver high quality learning and teaching, underpinned by high quality research and a culture of robust quality assurance and continuous quality enhancement. Now you can imagine, there's a strategic plan 2020 to 24 there. You can imagine the challenges of quality assurance and enhancement in a context where people have been focused on retaining population, investing in new programs and growing at the front line. There has been something of a reluctance to invest in the administration that is required for robust quality assurance and continuous quality enhancement, but we've made a lot of progress in that area recently. So it's a very prosaic and honest strategic plan. We have a lot of excellent quality education and high quality research going on here, but hitherto we have lacked the kind of systems and processes which are recognised in other universities for really assuring the quality of those things in a systemic manner. So we're working on that. Okay, so the best thing since I came to the Faroes, people sometimes ask me, please indulge me with this very briefly. The best thing since I came to the Faroes is that I made my debut for Scotland. Yeah? So when the Faroe Islands, when the Scottish football team came to the Faroe Islands recently, I was lucky enough to join the Tartan Army Select. The Scottish supporters always have virtually always have a match against opposition supporters when they travel internationally or receive other nations to visit Scotland. And I was lucky enough to be the little boy at the side of the park who turned up with his boots and got a game. So that was just a few weeks ago. The Scots, I should say, added 8-1. I can't claim to have contributed very much to that victory, but I did get on the park for most of the second half and run around. And then you can see us all together at the end of the match. So interestingly, that you achieve your one of your lifelong childhood aspirations about representing Scotland only by leaving Scotland. Yeah. Research in the Faroe Islands. Okay, I'm going to do something very quickly here which will bamboozle you, and it bamboozled me when I came here. So I came to the Faroe Islands imagining that the university would be not only the principal institution for research, but perhaps really the only institution for research. I was completely wrong. Here are the research institutions in the Faroe Islands. All of these institutions are doing research to varying degrees. Some of them are doing a lot of research, and some of them are primarily research institutions. Yeah, so you can see that there's a lot of them, and the university is only one of them. So it's quite hard for me to actually understand the full range of research which is going on here in the Faroe Islands, other than to say that my sense is that we are an unusually research-intensive society. So this is the research of the research institutions in a nation of 54,000 people. So you can see that there are other research-related institutions at the bottom in terms of the Faroese Research Council and the shared laboratory and other facilities which are provided in a collaboration in an organisation called Interim. So one of my challenges has been to try to understand this network of research, and one of the things that we've done recently to try to help to do that is to create or to adopt here in the Faroe Islands the pure research information management system, and the university has led on adopting that, not simply for the university but for all of the publicly funded research institutions here in the Faroe Islands. That is very much a work in progress, but you can see here that once we break down all those research organisations into their subunits, we have a total of 60 research units here in the Faroe Islands. To me, I think that's too many. And one of the concerns for me is that there doesn't seem to be very much in the way of planned and coordinated collaboration required by or driven by government to achieve that. So one of the things that I'm trying to do now is support others in building the case for that. And this adoption of PURE is intended to be a way or contributing in several ways to working towards transparency about the research that's being conducted and developing collaboration both within the Faroe Islands and between the Faroe Islands and partners abroad. Just to give you a sense of some of the research which is currently going on, again, I'm happy to share this presentation so you can get some of the detail, but some of the current research projects, and I emphasise that these are only some and they're not necessarily the best exemplars. I've just put this together for you quickly. So we are working with Bakkafrost, developing a circulation model for a sustainable aquaculture at sea. Bakkafrost is the big Faroese salmon producer, which is quoted on the Norwegian Stock Exchange. We're using geospatial science for the health and monitoring of shipping vessels, the early detection of fault and flaws in shipping vessels. We're doing work with the Faroese main power producer, SEV, funded by the Research Council, supporting development towards 100% renewable electricity. We have a lot of wind, we have a lot of tide, and a lot of potential for development there. The Faculty of Health Science is a participant in the Football is Medicine international collaboration that you might know about. So work there supported by the Faroese Football Federation, the Board of Public Health, the Danish Football Association and FIFA. We've had a lot of very impressive work going on in our population, because our population is such a small population. We've got such a lot of good data. We've done a lot of research which has been published internationally on COVID. In the area of the humanities and languages, we've got a really interesting collaboration with, it's funded by the Carlsberg Foundation, looking at Denmark and the new North Atlantic. And that's a project which has produced a big, impressive 2-volume publication, which is looking at framing North Atlantic cooperation anew. And what that basically means in the in the post-colonial era. The West Nordic Language Barometer is tracking language shift between Faroese, Danish and English, and the increasing displacement of Danish, which has been the second language here for a long time by English. We then have, I won't enumerate them all here, but you're getting a sense, and you can get the slides afterwards, and in due course you'll also be able to get a lot more information about our research through Pure Faroe Islands, which is already available for people to look at. So the UHI Islands Strategy, just to say a few words about that in terms of skills, workforce development. One of the key areas that we're working on just now is looking at the Faroese economy and areas for growth, which are outside of the main existing areas of marine aquaculture, salmon farming and sea fishing. And the government has established a growth forum in that area, a growth forum in that area, but also a growth forum in the area of information and communication technologies. So that's seen as an area for us to grow, and through our participation in that, we have a commitment from government to treble their investment in IT education here at the university. So we currently have, I think, 5 staff in the ICT area teaching a software engineering program at bachelor's level every 2 years. We're now going to have an annual intake to that program, and we're also going to have a new master's in data science, which will also have an intake every year. So that's a key contribution in the area of skills and workforce development for us at the moment. Strengthening research activity in the islands. You can see that we have a lot of research activity going on. We're looking to strengthen and develop that, and in particular by looking to broaden our sources of research funding. Now, our researchers here actually have quite good circumstances which I believe in my colleagues in Scotland would build a statue in my name if I were to give them my equivalent. So everyone here who is an assistant professor, an associate professor or a professor can expect 50% of their time to be allocated to research without even having external funding to support that. Now, those to me seem to be, based on my experience in my previous institutions, very, very good conditions indeed. And we are, of course, encouraging our colleagues to understand and appreciate that and make the very best of the time that they're given. And part of that involves looking to new and more diverse sources of funding to support the use of their research time to make it yet more productive than it already is. Supporting our islands' languages, we have a huge responsibility linguistically. So we have a language here which is spoken by a little more than 70,000 people across the globe. A fair proportion of those are actually in Copenhagen and in Denmark, but the biggest grouping, of course, is here in the Faroe Islands. So the university was developed initially with the primary purpose of supporting the preservation and the development of the Faroese language. What I'm keen to do is move the discourse here a little bit away from preservation and more in the direction of a revitalisation of the Faroese language. We have a challenge with school children running around in the playground who are speaking in English to each other before they've even begun to be taught English in the classroom. And that's because of getting the language from YouTube, from Netflix and from everywhere else. And I think that we need a discourse that goes beyond preservation of the language in order to deal with that very, very critical challenge to our language. Attracting new activity and people to the islands, well, the Growth Forum is very much focused on that. And we believe that the recruitment of up to 10 new ICT staff for our university will almost inevitably mean bringing international academics and researchers here to the Faroe Islands to join our team, and we'll be advertising that for that in the not too distant future. But also we want that master's programme in ICT, for instance, to be delivered in English, to recruit internationally, and that we hope that through that we will be attracting international students to the Faroe Islands on a fee-paying basis, and that those students will then, some of them, we hope, maybe fall in love not only with the Faroe Islands, but fall in love in the Faroe Islands and stay here and help us to grow and develop our population and our skills base. So yeah, I think I've gone on probably long enough now, and yeah, this is our main administration building, the Grothuset. That's the building I'm sitting in at the moment. Here there are a few buildings which are made of stone. Grothuset means the stone house. So when you have a building which is made of stone, it has that title. I think there are 2 or 3 of them only in Tórshavn. So this is our administration building, and if any of you are able to visit the Faroe Islands at any point, either through a collaboration that we can have together, or simply because you're coming to the Faroe Islands and want to see the university, we'll be very happy to welcome you here and invite you for a cup of coffee and a chat. So on that basis, thanks for listening and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Chik. That was an eye-opener, and no mistake. It's what a fascinating university. I'm sure there will be questions. There are questions in the chat already. Those who are panelists can actually ask you questions sort of face-to-face, as it were. But just before, your interest in football, you probably know this, but before the Faroe Islands joined UEFA, there used to be biennial international matches between the Faroe Islands and Shetland, all the way from 1929 onwards. I'm not sure which island group scored the most goals, but it was a disappointment to Shetland when the Faroe Islands went off to bigger and better things.
Yeah, and I know of a couple of Shetlanders who played in those games actually. Yeah, who were students in the Glasgow area. So I've spoken to them about that. Yeah.
Brilliant, great stuff. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll just since Todd is sitting right beside you on my screen, I'll pass on to Todd and see if he has a question for you.
I was reflecting on so thank you, Chik, for that wonderful presentation, and I couldn't help noticing that all the photos were taken on a really good day. I'm sure it doesn't always look like that.
Absolutely.
I was reflecting on your comment that you have to leave the country to make the national team. If that's the case, I'm waiting for the Wallabies to call me up at any time, because they're not doing very well at the moment. But I am interested on a couple of things. One is your ability to recruit international talent. Obviously, you've got some sort of internal incentivization processes there in terms of workload, but whether or not you need folk on the Faroe Islands to conduct that research or not. And then the second question is, are you seeing some natural collaboration with the university, and in particularly, I mean, you've addressed the 6 principles that we've got in the Island Strategy. Are you seeing any natural sort of opportunities for us to be able to collaborate on research in the immediate future?
Well, I didn't quite understand the first question, Todd. You broke up slightly here.
It's just about your ability to recruit researchers to the Faroes, and do they need to be actually on the islands to be conducting that research?
Yeah, that's something, an interesting thing for us to think about. Not necessarily, but it would be generally, I think, be desirable. Yeah. One of the challenges for us recruiting internationally is that most of our job adverts say it's an advantage to have the Faroese language and at least be able to understand another Scandinavian language. Now, the Scandinavian languages, tend to be mutually intelligible. Faroese is probably less intelligible to the other Scandinavians than vice versa. So, and most of our teaching does happen at the moment in Faroese, and there are challenges here also in teaching Faroese. So one of the things that we've done recently since I've come here is we've started up a programme for teaching Faroese to speakers of other languages. Because the process for teaching Faroese was not very good at all, so we're now training teachers to do that. So that's one of the barriers, and it's strange that actually the kind of exception to that rule is the rector of the university. Yeah, so there's been less expectation there, but I can say from experience that it's not an easy language to learn, and it's not particularly well taught at the moment. So in terms of getting researchers from abroad, that is one of the challenges that we face, but I hope to make the circumstances rather more benign linguistically in terms of the expectations. But is it absolutely essential that they're here? Probably not, but where it will introduce some kind of challenges is round about residence and payment. Yeah, those would probably be more negotiable if the person wasn't an employee of the university, ironically. Yeah. The second question, Todd, sorry, was about...
So the question...
Areas for collaboration. Yeah, areas for collaboration. Well, I mean, research is an area for collaboration, but also education can be an area for collaboration. Yeah. We can deliver joint programs, especially programs that you know, that we would be happy to deliver in English and that you're already delivering. We could look at some kind of arrangements for doing that, and that would likely to be a kind of win-win situation. Areas of, I think we would need some more dialogue round about areas for obvious, you know, collaboration in the research area. So I think we would need just some dialogue between researchers, and maybe we could convene some kind of forum where that could happen. Yeah,
sounds good.
I always think that these things are best to come from a bottom-up kind of way. If we make suggestions, we'll probably not come up with the best ones. So, but I'm sure that there's a lot of potential there, and I'm very keen to explore it.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Just on your comment about the football, can I just maybe tell briefly one very funny story? My university director here, very capable and excellent guy, but he's not interested in sport, and I realise that a lot of people aren't interested in sport, so I'm sorry if you're tired of hearing about it. But his understanding of the situation when I pulled on that Scotland shirt was that I had been drafted into the actual national team because they were somehow missing a player. So he had the idea that the Scottish international football team had drafted in the 58.5-year-old rector of the local university to take part in an international competition.
Great story. Thanks very much. Well, we'll mix up the questions between the panel and the chat. There's a question here from Sean, who says, I'm impressed by planned connectivity to Suðuroy. Can you give an approximate cost and what split between Copenhagen and Tórshavn will be? I brought 20 students from Solmorostic to the Faroes in 1985, and you should see their write-ups. Impressed would be inadequate.
Okay, so an approximate costing for the tunnel to Suðuroy, is that?
Yeah, it's just sort of, you know, there's a perennial questions in the Scottish Islands about tunnels, and we need to have some sort of idea how much we're actually talking about, and also who pays for it? Is it, you know, how much is paid for by Copenhagen and how much is paid for by the Faroe Islands themselves, roughly?
Well, my understanding is it's paid for by government here, almost entirely. A lot of the work is done by a Norwegian company, and I don't know too much about this, but there seems to be a very much a kind of, from what I can see, a kind of build it and it will work. So people pay tolls to go through the tunnels. The tolls initially in the immediate aftermath of the tunnel being built, I understand have been quite high, but then they've come down in cost very, very rapidly. And the extensive use of the tunnels is obviously a major contributor to their running and to their maintenance, and I'm guessing also to the subsequent building of the tunnels. But it's not something that I've looked into closely.
Oh, well, thanks very much. Yeah, that everyone who goes to the Faroes is impressed with the tunnels, so there's no doubt about it. Right, in the panel. Now, Beth, we managed to get you onto the panel there, yeah, which is great to see. Would you like to ask something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just struck through the presentation there about the similarities that exist between UHI and your university, and also I'm based in, like Andrew, in Shetland, and also the cultural and situational similarities that exist, and the ties are still very strong between the Northern Isles and Faroe, and I think will persist. And I think it's really interesting to look at the variety, the number of research institutes that you presented in Faroe, and the strength of that sector, if you like, in what you do. And I think for me, it's really useful to see the value that research obviously holds within society there. And I wondered if you might be able to reflect a bit on that, because I think often there's a lot of very useful innovation and research that goes on in an island context, but maybe the value that's placed on that is slightly less when you're part of a bigger nation. So I'd be interested to hear your reflections on the cultural significance and how that has evolved, how you came about to be in that place.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real eye-opener to me that when I got the job to come here, it was front page news, and there was several pages of coverage in the newspaper about it. So that told me that, you know, people here are very focused on education and research. To some extent, when I arrived here, I inherited a strategic plan where I felt the emphasis was too much on research. Yeah, it was, you know, there was not enough focus on education. But more generally, I think there is a high degree of interest in research, and people here are unusually active in engaging with various media. The media is always interested in research. Research very quickly becomes a news story. That then flows over into social media, and there's a very kind of active, engaged, contentious kind of approach, and people are really interested. You know, you can announce a seminar which is going to take place in a comms hall on a topic where you might in the UK, you know, really be struggling to get a few academics to show up, and 100 people will arrive. Yeah. And they'll sit and they'll pay detailed attention and ask intelligent questions about highly specialised areas. And that means that the researchers here, I believe, not all of them, but many of them, are unusually good at science communication. They're used to be having to explain their science, and I'm using science in the broad sense there, the Russian sense, if you like, of the systematic study of any object of investigation. They're used to having to explain their science to an intelligent lay audience. And that means that they're quite skilled in that regard. So here, I think the other thing is the number of institutions which are active in research, which become lobbies and demands for research funding from government and from other sources. So that gives you a kind of a lobby for science. Of course, we have some lobbies which are anti-science as well. And you get some lobbies which are also, we're a small society, do we really need all this research? Do we really need all, you know, why, you know, maybe we should just, now that our population is 54,000 and our society is booming, now that we have, you know, a kind of a housing crisis, you know, because we can't build housing quickly enough to house everyone, maybe some voices say we should pull back on higher education and let young people go to Denmark again and just hope that they come back. So there are all those discussions going on, but I think the argument for the university, for education being here in the Faroe Islands, for skills development, serving the needs of Faroe Islands, and all of that linked to research is strong. A challenge for me, though, is that because there is so much research that happens out with the university, there's a lot of public funding going into the production of knowledge that does not necessarily underpin the generation, the education of the next generation. And that's a discussion that I want to have a bit more with government here, because I feel that the public is already paying for the production of knowledge, which then we sometimes need to pay people again to feed into the education of the next generation. And I think that government could plan that a bit better. Sorry, I hope that's an answer to your question.
Definitely, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chik. Yes, whenever we hold public talks and things here in Shetland, it's the same sort of thing. You get a large turnout, and all the local intellectuals turn up that you didn't know were actually existed. They come and ask very good
the other
questions.
thing, Andrew, just very briefly, is the willingness to participate in research. There is an unusually high propensity of people to, you know, agree to participate in research of various kinds. And one of the outcomes of that is that we have this incredible genetic database, yeah, called FARGen, the genetic biobank. And that is linked to unusually good historical records from the churches to give incredible potentialities, I believe, for full population level historical and health related research.
Fascinating. I must find out more about that. I see Frank luckily has managed to join us as well after difficulties getting in.
Hello,
and
Frank.
He looks as if he's ready to ask a question.
I certainly am. Sorry about the delay. The wonderful Leanne had to step in and sort me out. So yeah, I'm reminded of you. That was a great talk, Chick. I'm reminded of the wonderful quote during the Thatcher years, which said that if you think education is expensive, wait till you see the cost of ignorance.
Yes.
I'm really enheartened by the international collaboration and the range of research resources that you have at your neighbours in different institutions across there, and I would really support the idea of further exploration and further discussion on that to see what the potential collaboration is. I can already see half a dozen different things that we do that would really well fit and slot in very, very easily to that. There used to be a vessel that came down from Faroe to I'm in Outer Hebrides, I'm in Lews, sitting here. There used to be a vessel that came down every year to the harbour and sort of unloaded fish and then loaded washing machines and various other things, and then went back to Faroe. And we went up, we were intending going. Yeah, I had to pull out at the last minute after my flight was paid and everything due to some major illness. But I'd love to go there at some point. I think we should really seriously not stop just talking about this and actually formulate some working group that would actively explore not just the link between the universities, but with the ancillary organisations like ours, NatureScot and so on around that we work closely with, because we also work in that sort of ecology of community, research and education within the areas. And I think there's a lot of crossover there. So I think we should definitely have that forward.
Okay, thank you, Frank. I agree.
Definitely, that's something we should get going after this meeting. Right, I want to see Donna. Hello, Donna. Nice to see you. I'm sure you've got something.
Hello, Andrew. Yes, I do. Fyrsta gånger Chick. Good to see you. We actually did a joint teaching initiative with the Faroe Islands. Andrew's maybe filled you in about this. I'm based in Orkney, and Andrew and I are part of the Institute for Northern Studies, which has campuses in Orkney, Shetland and Perth. And yes, Perth is north of somewhere, absolutely. So that's there. But we did have a teaching initiative where we had lecturers from the University of the Faroe Islands teaching on some of our modules, and we were helping them develop some kind of technical teaching aspects of that. And I think that might be a very good way to maybe start linking in, is to perhaps start that again, because it was really, of course, really interesting and useful for the students. And I myself teach Heinesen, for example, which I very much enjoy. It's for those of you who are not a great fan of Faroese literature, that's a very great Faroese writer, who's very, very close to Neil Gunn, who comes from my own particular neck of the woods, which is Caithness. So I think that could be a very concrete and real and easily managed step to take forward, just to go back to sharing those lectures again.
And I would really welcome that. Our Faculty of Education is a new part of the university, and I guess this is true in the UK as well. I know this from my experience at the University of West of Scotland and also elsewhere, that the incorporation of those teacher education, nurse education has brought with it the challenges of developing, research culture in particular, and that is one of the areas of our university which would really benefit from more international connection and collaboration in order to support the development of a more active research culture within that faculty. So great if we can get that going. Thank you.
It looks as if we're going to have to organise a few more meetings, Chick, after this.
Yeah.
Well, there are just a couple of questions in the chat. There are some specific ones which I think people maybe will email you with. There's a couple of very interesting researchers out there who want to come to the Faroe Islands and do some research with you, Natalia and Taylor. So they've got long sort of questions in the chat, so you might want to have a quick look at that. But I'm suggested he email you about that. And there's one from our PhD student, Jenny Murray, who is working in the archaeological field from Shetland, and she wonders if there's much archaeological research being undertaken at the moment.
I understand that there is at least some going on. I don't know a lot about it. It's not being conducted from the university. I think it's being conducted in some of those other institutions. But was it Natalia?
It's Jenny. Natalia.
It's Jenny, sorry. But if Jenny, I'm happy for her to email me, and I can point her hopefully in the right direction of finding, who's doing that research and where it's being done. It's definitely happening. Definitely happening.
Thank you very much. Well, Frank also he's put something in the chat that we have a particular set of skills in online and distributed education, which indeed we do. So we could maybe talk about that in future as well, if you're wanting to have some teaching centres on VOA or in Aya or in different parts of the Faroe Islands. So I think, unless there's another question in the panel, I'd just like to thank you very much, Chik, for a wonderful talk and
my pleasure.
Talk with potential. So lots of things to do next and to look into. And it was great to have hear about the Faroe Islands again. It's been too long since I was last there, and I hope to get there again soon. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. You'll be very welcome. Can I just make one concluding comment, just to say that I'll be delighted to receive emails. If it takes me a little while to get back to people, it's not because I'm not interested or keen to reply. We're juggling a kind of pretty extreme situation with COVID just now, and implementing a COVID passport arrangement for the university, which is very tricky. And we're also in the process of going through an institutional review. So we've got a lot on our plate at the moment. So sometimes our challenge sometimes is having the capacity to respond to all of the offers of collaboration that we receive. But collaboration with the University of Highlands and Islands is something that we're very, very keen on. And even if it does take us a little bit of time to get back and act on it, it's not because we're disinterested, it's just because we're developing that capacity for the meantime. So I hope that we will build something in the future out of the discussions that we've had today. And thank you very much for having me.
I'm sure we will. Thank you very much, Chik.
Okay. Thank you.